morning constitution in the morning is just that's the way to start the day.
I probably should have told you, but it's recording.
That's a good part of any. That's a good part of any wellness program.
It is good.
I think that's why if most executives, I think, would do that first in the morning, and I hope they do, we might have some stronger leaders in organizations if they would just have that first morning constitutional.
I agree.
Yeah.
It's
Well, get after it.
enlightening.
So get after it. Well, hi y'all. This is Clinton Shane, and this is my very good friend Amy Leslie. How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
Good morning.
How do you like our Human Realness? I think I'm going to call it's the Human Realness Studio, but I think I'm going to call it the Human Realness Stable.
I like it. You have a horse.
I like horses. Did you know I like horses?
I did.
Did you know I grew up with horses?
I did.
You did?
I knew that.
Because you grew up in
Louisiana.
I grew up Midwest. You grew up, so Louisiana is considered South.
South.
Okay.
Deep South.
Deep South. Okay, well, we're going to get into that.
Yeah.
All right. So I want to talk a little bit about my horse stable here, or my dialogue stable. So we're going to have some real nice, safe conversation, right? So it's always under what I call, let's see, we'll have it under my values. So that'll be the rules. How's that sound?
Good.
Which is going to be kindness. Those are my rules. Empathy. That's another big rule. We're going to find some advocacy in it, like some action that we can do to help people, right?
Okay.
And then love. So it's got to be about love, right? Love's just a denominator that kind of bridges us all.
I'm in.
Works for me.
I'm having a little more coffee because I don't know how kind I was this morning. I was stuck with trains and automobiles and
That's okay.
getting here, but we're good.
Well, that was advocacy. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's where that fierceness might come in. It's like, I need to move y'all because I need to get to this podcast
That's right.
and advocate for people. You're
Right.
blocking me.
Yep. Drop off your kids and move.
Well, thank you very much for being here. So we're going to have a safe space, though. I always like to be sure that here at the Dialogue Stable, here at the Human Realness Studio, that we have some nice, good energy, right? Some
Got it.
psychological
I see
safety.
you burn sage. So we're
Okay, so my cousin, she's into energy work. She does. She's starting to get tuned in to do Reiki. She's going to do
yes,
Reiki
okay.
energy, and so, and with the pivot I took this last year, I needed that, y'all. And so, her and I have taken this journey to really work on ourselves and everything. Oh, we really took this journey to work on ourselves, and so she said, "Hey, be sure that every full moon or whatever, you go through these cleanses, these journeys of your spirit, of who you are, because when people talk about you got to be authentic, well, that takes some work, to go find who your authentic self is. Oh, we got the puppies here. We got the puppies, and the other one's running around here somewhere. So if we have these are emotional support animals. So if they pop up here or whatever, just roll with it. So we have Leo, and then Luca.
He ran off that way. He's looking for his bone.
Okay, Luca's around here somewhere. Okay, so my cousin's always saying, make sure you set your intention, set your energy, set your space.
Okay.
Whenever you're doing these conversations, so she's always saying, make sure you sage your house, good energy. Okay, Leo's gonna come
It's
over
all
here
good.
to
Come
you,
on.
and so let me do my thing here. Okay. So
Okay.
this is good energy.
Okay.
This is what my husband would call the woo-woo stuff.
Okay.
So I know I can't take the mic all the way this way, so just let me light it and do my
Okay.
thing. So we're creating some safety. All right. I'm gonna blow this out. Are you allergic to this? Are
We'll
you
see.
allergic to
we
this?
will find out.
Do you have an EpiPen?
Just sign a waiver.
What do I do? Is there a waiver? Okay, here comes Luke.
I think I'm good. Okay, he's too short. I understand.
You gotta help him.
Come on. I understand. I have short legs too.
This is what we call equity. Equally, the height is the same, but we have to dip
That's
down.
right.
Oh, that's going to
Boost.
be a little smoky, but I'll leave that. Is that going to be too smoky, you think?
For what?
I don't know. This is the space. All right. So we got this. So let's get into the conversation. Couple
Okay.
of housekeeping items, okay? First of all, you are who? What is your preferred name?
Okay.
What are your pronouns.
Okay.
Okay. We'll create some get to know you a little bit on this level. What is some of your background, your heritage?
Okay.
Let's start out there.
Okay.
This is my good friend Amy Leslie, and without her, I got to tell you, I don't know if I would have the best perspective of others without your coaching.
Thank you.
It's very practical.
Thank you.
You help me see people differently instead of them attacking me all the time based on my issues. You help me see a different perspective, so it doesn't feel so threatening for me.
Okay, good.
And I
I'm
appreciate that. So I think today that's what we're going to talk about. And so our big topic today is going to be willful ignorance is a perspective, y'all. Maybe not one we like, but it is a perspective. And so we might dissect that a little bit today.
Okay.
And so pronouns, name, preferred name, who you are.
Okay.
Go.
I am Amy Leslie. I go by Amy. My name is not Leslie. It still isn't.
Oh, you have a first and last like I do.
I
and
do.
It's all
So
mixed
everyone
up.
calls me Leslie. It's okay. I've been called worse. My pronouns are she, her.
Okay.
And I grew up in Louisiana. There's a lot of willful ignorance in the Deep South. And we'll talk a little bit about some of that.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
That perspective.
Ooh, perspective. That's what we'll call them.
And so I am Cajun. I make really good gumbo.
Really?
Yes.
I don't know if you've made any gumbo for
I
me
haven't,
yet.
but I can.
Can we have a gumbo cook party?
We can. I make the best gumbo.
Oh, that sounds like a challenge. Oh, that might be a challenge.
So
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. For y'all out there that can do some Cajun gumbo cooking, let's see if we can get a challenge going here. I don't know, y'all.
And I've lived all over. So I moved from Louisiana to Colorado, which was a big shift in culture and lifestyle and everything. And then I've lived everywhere from New Mexico to Tennessee, and then here. I've been here almost 10 years.
Wow.
So.
And you and I know one another because...
Oh, I served on the SHRM, Diversity and Inclusion Committee. I am not an HR professional, but many of my clients are.
I'm a former backslidden HR professional.
Yeah.
So I would call this human realness, not human resources.
Yes.
But so we served for the Society of HR Management. We served on the board as the diversity directors, and that's how we got to know one another. Yeah. My sister and partner in crime.
That's right.
So today, talking about that willful ignorance and how you've kind of been through your travels in corporate and everything that you've done, how did you feel in all those different areas? What were some of the common core things that you saw in individuals that had this conditioning that brought them to this willful ignorance? What were some of the common themes that you saw in all those different areas?
Yeah. I think let's define.
We're
willful.
defining
Okay,
things.
this is the only time
We're defining willful ignorance.
I
would think people would just automatically know what that is.
I would think so, but I actually Googled it this morning because I was like, I'm going to look
Lord.
up the actual definitions. So ignorance is lack of knowledge or information.
Okay.
And so, in my opinion, when we think about leaders or we think about human beings in the diversity, equity, inclusion space, I think it's a lack of exposure.
Lack of exposure, experience.
Yeah. So if I haven't been exposed to a situation or something, then I probably have some ignorance there in my perspective.
Right.
I'm missing that perspective. And then willful definition, having or showing stubborn and determined intention to do as one wants, regardless of the consequences or effects. So it's kind of like, I think of it like the adult version of, I'm not listening, like children do. Like, I don't know and I don't really want to know.
Right. Now, we know from there,
Yeah.
we have to start with those things. We have those definitions.
Yeah.
We didn't make them up. They're there.
Yeah.
You got them in Google, Webster, Merriam's Dictionary, wherever. Like, those things are there, right?
Right.
So we have, within certain privileged guidelines, we have access to things of knowledge and things to help us grow and understand, right? So there is that there, and we can grow in our ignorance, but the willfulness is no, because I like where I am. Thank you very much.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I think what happens is that some people, due to a lack of exposure, knowledge, don't know. And when it is pointed out to them, their response is, I really don't care to know. Or, well, that person's being sensitive.
Yeah, it's always a deflection to the other.
Right. And so to me, I think this is the most dangerous part of a lack of inclusion. I think it's what fosters and perpetuates marginalization is
Right.
this willful ignorance. And if the majority continue to sit in willful ignorance, then we'll never have movement of true inclusion.
No, we won't. And that's where it's so key to have the perspective, because I think we've always kind of lived under this idea, or at least I have, and many people like me, this idea that there is black, white, right, wrong. There is the truth.
Right.
The truth. And then there are just other stories. But there's like this, the true thing. And what I've come to understand in perspective is that it is about each narrative of what brought someone to that point in their life. And that's authenticity to me. And so, but it's so difficult for people to want to see that other side, because we have this rightness that we want to protect.
Yeah. And I think it's hard for people to understand things aren't, in my opinion, or it's not this or that. It's usually this and that.
Yeah.
And so when we're listening to people's perspective on a situation, I mean, each person's truth is their own, but, the reality is usually the and, not the or, but we get drawn into these polarizations. It's this or that, not and. And that's hard. It's hard to find that common ground if people are stuck in the or.
Right. And then an offset of that would also be how willful ignorance is the conditioning brought up by stereotypes. And so therefore, without that experience or wanting to be exposed to that experience, we don't meet other unrepresented or minority or people who just are different than us.
Right.
To grow a little more. So we just kind of stay stuck in it.
Yeah.
So healthy conflict. Can we discuss it?
Let's.
Can we get
We
into
love a
it?
healthy conflict.
I like a healthy conflict. Curious. So we got our coffee, and I usually like to tell my guests, okay, we can have coffee, cocktail, tea time. We can have tea time, but I know you love your coffee.
I love coffee.
You love your coffee, and so
This is
we
good
have our
coffee.
mugs. So we have our get after it.
Mine says see the good.
See the good.
Yeah.
So you had to see the good on the way here
did.
through the
I'm
two
better
trains
now.
cutting you off and keeping you from this show. I tell you what, the world, we just think the world's out to get us, don't we?
I have no patience. I don't like waiting.
So that's something.
Yeah.
So healthy conflict. Ready for this? Okay. You don't like waiting.
Yeah. I don't like willful ignorance either.
I know. So
But I
this
take
just
breaths.
we're talking about things that are just spinning you out of control.
Uh-huh.
So healthy conflict. So you and I are okay with approaching conflict in a healthy way. I think you and I both understand, and you've helped me understand, certainly, like, let's create some psychological safety first with things. So in this willful ignorance and in healthy conflict, how would you approach? Because one of the things that I learned in my former years as a human resources professional, very professional, is that everything had to be structured in a way. And so I couldn't really think outside of that box. And so a lot of times what that meant was if you didn't do anything until the problem occurred, then you go to the manual or whatever and figure it out.
Yeah.
So a lot of times proactive measures aren't necessarily taken
Correct.
to work with humans, right? Because humans are just complex. So you and I were suggesting, like, how about we do this thing when we're getting to the diversity dialogue and talking and everything? How about we bring up some different scenarios? Like when I took my senior exam, certification exam, it's more about scenarios in HR. And you and I had suggested, I said, how about we do this? Why don't we form like a let's talk dialogue profile thing to help people who seem to want to get beyond this willful ignorance and know more about diversity, inclusion, and all these things? How about we talk about it in some of the different scenarios? If somebody who is lesbian, gay, trans can come into their workplace, and if they don't feel safe, if they feel like there's some discrimination, like they can come to you and talk and work, how to work these things out and what resources might be available to them that they're not getting provided. So it was like we opened up a can of worms. It's like, well, we can't do that.
Yeah. I think
And it became like, and it wasn't so much I don't think it was an intentional, we don't want to do that. It's like,
No.
I'm not sure we can.
No, I think people have a tendency to want to not open up the can of worms because they fear that the conversation, I think they fear they're not prepared for it.
Right.
And so they're more fearful of where the conversation might go rather than understanding that if we're not having these conversations and then we wait until there is an incident, it's far worse.
Right.
It's far worse to be discussing these kinds of perspectives when someone has been offended.
Or when you're in a mediation.
Right.
It's like it's too late for it.
Right. So I find in our customers, the ones that proactively have open conversations about race, gender, marginalization, impact, perspectives, have cultures of high psychological safety.
Okay.
So people feel like, oh, I feel like I can say, it bothers me when someone said this or that statement hit me wrong.
Right.
Those are the cultures I think that are open to people just stating how someone's words, behaviors, or actions impacted them.
Yeah, because it seems like so often, again, in being in HR, it was more of, well, if you don't address it, didn't happen, or if you don't look over there, it's not happening. Just kind of ignore it till it gets to our office space. And that, again, definitely creating the psychological safety first to understand, like, how are we going to have these conversations and how we're going to move forward with this.
Yes.
So with that patience, how do you, whenever you're working, because I want to address this because I'm an impatient person too. How do we address when we have those blockages, those spiritual, professional blockages? And so how do we address that when we're impatient and the other group doesn't want to move forward? How do we, and kind of how you and I would identify this willful ignorance, how do we move the needle forward in helping them understand and see the perspective in a way? Like, how could we have better addressed how to put forth our idea?
Yeah. So I think it has to be done one-on-one. I never find it fruitful to address someone else's blind spots publicly or in front of others. So I like to pull a person aside one-on-one. I like to ask them if they're open to some perspective. So
I always like that question.
Are you open to some perspective? And
you have dropped that on me so many times. Are you open to some perspective?
Yes.
Yes.
And then, yes. And then I like to remind people that we as leaders are not judged by our intentions. We're judged by our impact.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so sometimes I think it's helpful to say, I wonder if you might consider that when you said this, here's how it landed on me. Here's the impact. I find people more receptive to that, generally, to say, okay, it landed when you said this, when you stated this, here's how it landed on me, here's the impact.
And you say that with such grace and kindness. It's not. And I remember, Brene Brown. I'll bring it up. I don't know if I can or not on a podcast, but she had talked about in one of her little videos I saw, and it said, "I'm not as sweet as I used to be, but I'm a hell of a lot kinder."
Yeah.
Is because you're not playing nice. You're actually genuinely providing some kindness here to say, like, hey, I'm a safe space if you're open to receiving a perspective here.
Yeah.
And you say it with such kindness. And I think that's a tone we often don't take in community, corporate, social, is how to react with it or present it in kindness.
We're triggered, right? So we have triggers. So I'll give an example. I was brought into an organization to work with their leadership team, most of whom were male.
Mm-hmm.
And while the CEO was introducing me, he talked about all my credentials, which was great. And then he ended by saying, and let's face it, she's a hell of a lot better looking to look at than me for the next few hours. I was triggered because my whole life, being a female, usually the only female.
Can we take a moment of pause? What did he say again?
He said that. And he meant it as a compliment, which
sure.
at my age,
I'm sure.
Fine.
Okay. I want to pause this moment right here because I have something I want to say about it, but let's continue. Okay. So he says that.
He said it. And so as a female who has always felt like I've had to overcome that, I was triggered and I was seeing red, I call it. And I probably was red, like from anger. But I just moved on. But afterwards, I pulled him aside and said, do you have a minute for some perspective? And he said, yes. And I said, I understand that you were just kind of talking. And I said, but I need you to understand that all of the credentials that you had listed as to why I was here were thrown out the minute you talked about the way I looked. And that was the impact it had on me. And he was mortified.
Wow.
He said, oh, I'm so sorry. I hadn't thought of that. I said, because I don't know that you would have introduced a male leader coming in by talking about the way he looked versus all the things he had accomplished. And so for me, that was a little bit triggering, and it was a bit, it kind of took my credentials down a notch because that made me feel like, well, is that why I'm here? Or am I here because of all those things I accomplished? Yeah. And so he was open to it and apologized, which I was looking more just to give him perspective, but yeah.
Wow. So that's definitely a kind approach to take to it because the trigger is what did you do in that trigger point? Like, what was your mindfulness, conscious, like,
you breathe.
Amy, don't blow up because I want to scissor kick him. How do you refrain? What do you say to yourself? Because
these people are paying you. You think
these people are paying you. That's my mantra.
Breathe. But at the same, it is hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
And in my younger days, I wouldn't have probably been so kind.
Yeah.
In my 20s, I wouldn't have been as kind.
Shit.
And it happened way more frequently then.
Yeah.
But I learned that didn't get me anywhere. Right. What got me somewhere was to say, because I have to believe, and I have come to understand that 99% probably % of the time, there's no negative intent there.
Right.
It's their own automatic thoughts and trigger. It's their own perspectives. Right. And that come out in blind spots.
It's not done intentionally.
No, not most of the time. Not
right. And so when I said that moment of pause is going back to that point there in the scenario, where it would say, well, there's a perspective of, let's say, that the cisgender white male, whoever one deems, the privileged one in power and leadership. That's not going to be this show at this point right now. We can talk all day long about that one, but there's that perspective where he is saying that is not what I meant. Right. And so there's also on the diversity spectrum of inclusion, wherever we want to be with this, how we measure it, is it's also that individual's perspective. because
Right.
we can't make them feel like a piece of shit if we're wanting to help them improve how they may come across and how
Right.
their actions may be perceived. Because it is definitely a thing. Because you would hear, like, oh, you look good today, or she's a hell of a lot better looking. These things, they're never done. You know who those individuals are. It's never done with this intent
No.
to criticize you. It's a form of flattery to them, but it is.
Yes.
Then, like you said, it was like, but it knocked my credentials out of the way because women, it's had to take this for us to get here.
Correct.
Yeah.
I can't just walk. What many people don't understand as a consultant is that I can't just walk into a room and have anyone assume that I know what I'm talking about, that I ran business units, that I had P&Ls larger than some of the companies I consult with. No one will assume that. In fact, I get assumed I was an HR professional because I'm a female.
Yeah, you get that assumed a lot.
And I never was in HR, which I'm not, there's nothing insulting about being an HR professional, but that's not my background. It's just not my background. So, I ran business units.
We love
I ran,
HR people. We do.
Yeah, I ran, P&Ls for a Fortune 500 company, but I don't get the assumption that I was at that level of leadership because, quite frankly, there aren't very many females who in corporate America are at that level of leadership. So it's really hard and triggering when someone makes an assumption that I wasn't there or that I didn't have that responsibility, or they're surprised by it. Somebody looked at my LinkedIn recently. And he's one of my clients and said, I didn't realize that, that you were at this company and did that. That's impressive.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was like he was surprised by it. That's a blind spot. And I mean, I appreciate it, but at the same time, it felt a little like, well, why didn't you assume that? Or why is that so impressive? There are other people that have been in those positions, but it's because I think there's that blind spot of oh, you're a female, or oh, you're this
or that.
But
I have before we go on, little caveat, moment of pause. We don't say blind spots. It's an ableist word, I've heard.
Oh, what do we say now?
I don't know for sure. If people want to maybe comment on the podcast or something to let us know, like if there's some education here that we need to know, please write in. Go to hello@bsgconsulting.org and just send in if there's another term we should use on the blind spot. Because I heard that brought up. But anyway, so so curious, how would you handle this? Can I give you a scenario? A human realness and HR scenario?
Yes.
How are we doing on time? We good on time? Yeah.
You guys talk until you don't want to talk.
Oh, okay.
It's your
So let's talk. So I go into. So I got my franchise, right? I'm rocking and rolling. I am Clinton Shane. I am. People know I'm gay. I'm married. I'm ready to rock it in my franchise, my business, my corporate. I've made it. So would go into some boardrooms, very, conservative with my tie and my things on and trying to do my thing and going by the corporate sales book, trying to sell my services, making these connections. So I go into a boardroom, I get in there, and it's a parallel with your story, I feel. You can let me know. It's like, oh, there's some differences, Clint. So go into the boardroom, I head in there, and I would get called ma'am all the time over the phone. If I would land some, like I talked to the administrative assistant, executive assistant, who would get me in with the COO or COO or somebody from leadership, and it was typically they would always say, "All right, ma'am," and I would finally just stop correcting them, and I was just like, "All right, just tell them Clinton Shane will be there." "All right, ma'am." "All right, bye." And so I would get there, right? And so already have this impression of something. I'd show up in the boardroom, and there would always be a confused look. And this would happen on several occasions with different types of comments. But it would usually be how we'd start out the meeting. They know all about my franchise, go a little bit through my resume. And then it's talking to them about how I can help them with workforce staffing. And it goes into, well, They said you were a woman over the phone. Who are you? Like that. Or there would be a situation where I would stand up in front of the group and give a little spiel to some of the department directors, and there would be a couple of times that that even one of my recruiters would be with me on the call, and they would say, "Well, we got a pretty boy up here, don't we?" So, because we'd work in light industrial, so how? Now we know they're just shitty people and shitty employers. That we cannot deny. But in this space, when we talk about marginalization, willful ignorance, education, how do you address things like that to the marginalized group? Like, what would be the best way for us to approach that? And kind of shed some light on that willful ignorance instead of us triggering and being like, hey, asshole, don't be talking like that to me.
I think it's the same thing.
Praise
I think
the Lord.
it's the same kind of situation. Somebody thinks they're being funny or making a whatever comment for whatever
Right.
reason. Either
Right.
they're uncomfortable or they think they're genuinely giving a compliment, you a compliment. But I think it's the same situation. I think you have to ask questions. And I think you have to ask people if they're open to perspective. And you have to make that statement of, I know you probably didn't intend for this, but here's how that comment landed on me and my perspective, and I just wanted you to know in case others you encounter might share a similar perspective. I wouldn't want you to be seen in a bad light because of something you said with this intention when it really created this impact.
Right.
So it's that reminder of intention versus impact that's helpful. And if someone doesn't care about their impact, then I would argue they have no business being a leader.
So that's that kind of that empathy pillar.
Yeah.
It's like, listen, if you, because you got to have some common core structures when you've made the decision to apply for a job to go into a director level position. You're gonna manage people. Like, there's got to be that empathy there on the other side.
I'm not afraid to tell leaders who tell me that they're too sensitive, or if I hear a leader say that they don't care about the impact they've created, then I am not afraid to tell them, I don't think you belong in leadership if you don't care about impact. Because if you are going to influence another human being, you have to care about the impact you're creating, or you have no influence.
Curious.
Yeah.
Curious. So let's talk about the identities, spiritual, whatever, however, mental, physical, of those individuals who we would say fall in that willful ignorance category. How do I identify them? How, and then when is it time to approach? When's it time to know when to have the healthy conflict, and when is it time to just shake your hands and say, I'm done with this, y'all.
Yeah.
I'm done with this. Like, I've cooked this steak. I'm done.
I think approach is always, to me, one-on-one and in a setting outside of either person being triggered. So once emotions have calmed down and we're back into logical state, when it's time to say goodbye is when you've presented facts, rationalization, or an argument for a different perspective, and someone just doesn't care.
They just don't care.
And in that case, I've realized that's the willful part. I don't care. I'm intentionally not caring about the effects of what I just said or did.
Right. You cannot make me be involved in this.
Yes.
No, you're trying to discredit who I am individually.
Yes. So when someone does not care about the impact and digs their heels in, I cannot influence that.
No.
When they've stated, I do not care, I do not want to know, and I'm then no matter what facts or argument or information you present, they're not listening because I've just told you I don't care.
Yeah. It's almost like a, what's the term that these kids use these days? I know it's not these kids. It's not called blacklisted. You're scapegoating. It's
gaslighting.
Yeah. So you gaslight the situation to make it
Yeah.
to make yourself so that you don't have to work on yourself to know that
Yeah.
maybe there is that other perspective. Like, it's easier to just gaslight it, create this cognitive dissonance, and just be
Yeah.
like, oh no, you're the problem, not me, instead of opening up and be like,
Yeah.
I could be the problem.
Well, yeah. I mean, we see a lot of that in social media. So you have these people that make these bold, and it's really come in, willful ignorance has really come to light this year on social media. You'll have someone make a really bold statement as if they are the expert on something, and you'll call them and say, hey, I have some questions. And when you start questioning what facts or logic or rationalization they've built that bold opinion on, then they start to get defensive.
Yeah.
And I mean, this has recently happened to me. And she said, well, I don't know a lot about it. But yet you chose to post a very bold statement presenting yourself rather like an expert on the subject. But then now when I'm questioning, just asking some questions about, and what are you basing that on? And what information led you to believe that way? You're telling me you don't know much about it. Well, clearly you don't know much about it. That's why, but you're willing to post bold statements presenting yourself as an expert on the subject, as if you know a lot about it. So that's really interesting to me. To me, that's willful ignorance. I have an opinion. When you challenge my opinion with facts and questions and rationalizations, I don't want to face those. I don't want the knowledge.
Yeah.
Or the new information. So I'm just going to get defensive and tell you I don't know much about it and shut you down. And to me, I can't at that point, I can't reach that person. So I'm just going to move on. Okay. Hoping that maybe my questions will cause them to later on go and look at some different perspective or information. That's all you can do is plant that seed by asking questions.
I was gonna say, are we gonna plant that mustard seed and hope it grows
We
into
hope.
something beautiful?
We
That's what we were
hope.
taught in Sunday school. Were you taught that in Sunday school? Plant the seed?
I think so. Is that, I don't know. I
Oh,
didn't,
it's
I
like
went to
no,
Catholic
if you
school,
if
but
you
I
had
didn't
faith
pay.
as small as a mustard seed.
Okay. See, I don't.
Oh, you were Catholic. I was Baptist.
Yeah,
forgot.
I didn't pay attention to
My husband's
much
Catholic, so
when I
I'm
was.
Catholic. I kind of understand y'all.
I didn't. I'm sorry to all of the nuns at the school. I did not pay attention. I kind of daydreamed.
Were they
a lot.
willfully ignorant? Were you just impatient with them?
They
Was
probably
that-
thought I was I was definitely willful.
You- Well, I want to. So let's talk a little bit deeper into some things because can I get a little personal?
Yes.
Okay, let me get a little
always.
personal. So, because human realness, I think we I don't want this to be about separating, anything from fact from fiction, from what happens in corporate in our homes. Because I think there's a lot of parallels in my life I can see through with my family situations, with the church, in corporate America, the military, working in the diversity inclusion space. So I see a lot of parallels and things. And one of the conversations that I had with my mom was when I had already come out, and it was 15 years later, and I went to go revisit them because I was about to get married, and I thought, I know they're not going to come to the wedding, but I certainly want to see where this chapter is and kind of close this out. And so I go and and I feel like I've journeyed, I've experienced the world, I'm worldly now. No, and so I'm going to have this great conversation with my parents, and they're going to come to this great understanding of who I am, my authentic self, right? And so I go and I have this conversation, and I really laid out some good factual things about being gay, how we're gay, all these things that I've learned, and I really broke it down for him, and even understanding like more about the Bible, how I was conditioned into this understanding of this fundamental doctrine. And so I was like, let's look at some history there. So I was having a good conversation with them that wasn't fighting. And then there was this moment where my mom, like it clicked, and she got upset and just started crying. And she goes, "You're just trying to take my foundation away." And I think that in that moment with her, she was being incredibly honest, because I wasn't trying to. I wasn't trying to shame her for even how they grew up and what they believed in. I didn't want to shame that part of them, right? So, But there's a part there when she said that I thought that I've equated to leaders when I've provided them facts and statistics and how they get that same kind of upsetness that my mother is. Upsetness the word? I don't know. I made it up. Praise the Lord. And so there's that little piece right there that I can't help but think that there's similarities there in those reactions, those triggers.
Yeah, she's stuck in or.
Yes.
It's this, or that, not and.
Right. Because if she were
I can have my foundation and love my son unconditionally.
Right.
She's in or.
She's in or. But, and leaders do that.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, or they can't have an and because if there's this little complex gray area.
Right.
They're not sure how to work with that. And if I'm creating this complex gray area for her, that's going to take her away from who she is. And I think at the same time, it's going to cause her and that leader to reflect on who they really are and maybe what pain they've inflicted.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of times that's where willful ignorance comes in, because you do, when it comes to authenticity, you have to realize that, are you going to be okay with the things that you've done, not as regrets, but where you can do some course correction for yourself?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the piece that they fail to put together.
Mm-hmm.
Have any comments on that? I don't know if a question. But I see the
I-
similarities.
That's it. She
those
isn't
reactions.
willing to accept multiple perspectives
Yeah.
as people's truths.
right.
It's only her perspective that is mattering in that moment.
Right. Now, for that individual, my mother, that leader, I would say, what would I say? What would you suggest that they like? We can shake our hands and move on, but there's also areas to identify those individuals. They're leaders, and we do have to work with them. They're our family members. We
Right.
have to have Thanksgiving with them. Like, how do we still navigate those relationships?
Well, I think until that person, I think the question is, I wonder if you are ever going to be able to stand firmly in your beliefs and perspective while also
Right.
and
Mm-hmm.
accepting mine
Yeah.
and allowing both of those realities to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And if that person isn't willing to open up to there being two
Mm-hmm.
perspectives, then it's probably not going to happen. It's going to be always an or.
Yeah. I love the and or perspective. Are you an or an and?
Yeah. And
Is
a
there
lot of people are or
Yeah. Yeah.
perspectives. It's this or that. We had a recent situation that was brought to my attention. I was not in the room, but of a leader calling himself a slave driver in a room of other leaders, some of whom were persons of color.
Oh, he needs a prayer. Okay.
And so to me, that's another example of willful ignorance.
Is that willful? Oh, it makes me cringe, girl.
I don't know how you couldn't know that that's not
Yeah.
an acceptable thing to say in a room full of people in general, much
Yeah.
less also knowing you have persons of color on your leadership team sitting there.
Okay, go
So
ahead.
if it's not willful, okay, so then people were literally scrambling on how to address this. So this is an organization that clearly does not have psychological safety. So scrambling on how do we address this? What do we do? What do we say?
I'm getting that image in my head, and it's kind of hilarious for me. Just because of the work I do it, I'm like, all right, y'all scramble.
So we're afraid to offend this person.
Mm-hmm.
He's clearly a person in power.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than just go and say, do you have time for some perspective? And I wonder if you might consider, because I don't imagine this person, and I have to believe this person wouldn't want to intentionally marginalize or offend people,
Right.
but I think you'll find out real quickly when you address it and ask questions. And either way, it's not an acceptable statement, and it
Right.
needs to be discussed and addressed. And yeah,
I laugh because I just see the reactions of organizations when a CEO or an executive might say something like that, and it is scrambled like, let's update policies. Let's do that. Let's go through the diversity checklist. We're
let's
great. And it's
talk.
like, hold up.
Let's talk.
Let's have a conversation about how maybe you might have some kind approaches to things. Because I always tell people, I'm like, kindness is free. Having empathy it's free. These things are free things. Like, have you even woven those into your culture yet? And someone could have just approached instead of scramble and the whole, like I see, I don't know. I just see some chaotic scene in the show Office or a movie, people scrambling, but like, call marketing, call HR,
Right.
call our communication.
Right.
Like,
Instead of somebody just going to that human one-on-one and saying,
right. So they start going through the
Let's talk.
diversity checklist of items, and they're like, oh, we got to do this and this and this
and
and this. It's like,
document and
how about we go talk? Has anybody talked to the CEO?
Has
Has anyone surveyed your employees? Well, no. Oh,
yeah.
how about we start with some conversations?
Right. And just
Yeah.
ask that person and enlighten them to what perspective, what was the impact they created.
Right. And that typically happens when the coals simmer and the fire's put out. It's like, oh, what did we learn from this? It's like, oh, we could have, which goes back to our impatient idea that we had to our fellow colleagues and board members. Like, how about we do, a let's talk pre-issue dialogue? And it's like, we can't do that. It's like, but after the coal simmer, it's like, oh, I wish we'd had that policy, or I wish we would have had that conversation.
Yeah, because now we've got potentially
Right.
a complaint, a formal complaint, a litigation. Rightfully so. That's to me a grossly ignorant statement. But maybe if we had done some perspective dialogues preemptively, that leader would have known, oh, don't say that, don't say this, don't, it could have been addressed.
Yeah. So I feel like today, because if you don't mind, I would kind of like to carry, because I feel like this could be a series of conversations, this willful ignorance. And let's kind of see where it goes, because I want to see if we can put this out there and then just have some write-in about things. Like, what are some willful ignorance scenarios that you've had that maybe we could help you address through? Because I think that's how I've always been able to educate myself. And truth be told, I'm going to reveal something on this show, and I'm going to need you not to judge me, please, as my friend and colleague and my sister and partner in crime. I didn't study for the SHRM certification exam.
Well,
I didn't study. I took a practice exam once, and I went in there and I passed it.
okay.
So I only say that because the majority of that test is this: scenarios. Going through, how would you work through this scenario, blah, blah, blah. So I always felt like I had a pretty good experience. And I say that because I want to work through some of these scenarios with people and help them navigate through it. So this might be something that we continue, just how we continue the series of willful ignorance. It is a perspective. Let's decondition it. I'm still trying to decondition the one from my mother. I don't think that's ever going to happen. So that's just shake the dust from your feet. And so, but how do we address the ones that we got to work with, we got to live with in our communities? Like, how do we address like those things and kind of go through it? But I feel like today is a good one on the first phase is know our trigger points. And that takes some good mindfulness based
It does.
daily application approaches, and we can get to those. And then, so knowing your trigger points, and then also understanding how can you pivot, how can you kind of turn it around with a kind approach for the other to see another perspective in a kind way.
Correct.
Okay.
Addressing that, like you said, willful ignorance is a perspective.
Yeah.
We have to acknowledge that. And
Yeah.
to that person, it is their own perspective.
Okay. I got to ask you a question if you'd be willing to do something.
Perhaps.
Okay. Can we do some role playing?
Sure.
Okay. So part of psychological safety, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. We're going to see the good and get after it, right? So I always tell my teams and my clients, we got to have a psychological, a safe word. Okay. Can't go there. So what do we want ours to be?
Oh, a safe word?
Yeah. What's our safe word? Dialogue safety. What's our safe word?
Meaning like what? If we're triggered, we need a
If
word.
we're triggered, or it's like this is too uncomfortable, like what would be our safe word?
I like the word pause.
I do like that word. That's a good pause.
Let's pause.
There's a lot of P's
for some
in safe
perspective.
words. Yeah. There's I've had people like you've said pause. I have a pineapple. I have a poop. Someone is at a safe word's poop, and I was like, okay,
I
this
think
is your show.
Pause.
Pause. Yours is pause.
Pause that for perspective.
Okay.
Because
Am I scaring you right now?
No.
Okay.
Why?
I don't know, because I want this to be a build up. I'm trying to be dramatic, and I don't know if it's working with you.
It's hard to rattle me.
Okay, so now as I'm getting ready for over here, okay, because we got a little more about our studio because we're COVID friendly and safe. We got Lysol.
Yes, I've been vaccinated. I've had both,
Did
and I'm
you
in
get vaccinated?
3 or 4 weeks ago. Yeah.
Oh my God.
I had both.
We are. That'll be another thing about willful ignorance we'll have to talk about. That'll be a scenario just about the pandemic, people going back to work. I've had everything from people saying that they're going to label people on their name tags green for vaccinated, red for not. They were going to label their employee. I go, you are going to segregate your employee by vaccinated and not vaccinated? Some of these people were diversity leaders. That is a willful ignorance I cannot wrap my head around. Okay, so we have our Clorox wipes. All right, this is we're all safe here.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you go ahead and talk? I want you to talk a little bit about some of the science of perspective, and what you do while I'm getting ready over here. Okay.
Okay, sounds good. So, we, as part of what we do at Perspective Consulting, is we talk about the science behind human behavior, thinking, and action. And so there is a science to how people think, how they approach conflict, how they make decisions. And so understanding that helps us drive better conversations with people by understanding, how do I process information? How do I communicate? How do I handle conflict? Some people shut down in the face of direct conflict communication. So we study that science so that we understand how to fine-tune how we approach and lead and influence others to create maximum impact.
Yeah.
And there is a science, a studied science. We love the tool, the predictive index. It's our favorite, but there are others that help us just get more and more insight as to how a person approaches a conversation even.
Yeah. And for the disruptors and the generations behind you and I, we basically teach people how not to be assholes.
Yeah.
Would
We
you
call
say
them
that's
boss
a good-
holes.
Boss holes.
Boss
Oh.
holes. Don't be a boss hole.
I don't know how I feel about that word. I gotta let that resonate. That's gotta simmer.
Boss
Ooh.
hole. Don't be a
I
boss
don't like.
hole.
I don't know how I feel about it. Okay, are you ready?
Yes.
All right. So,
Are we?
which wig do you want?
Oh.
We're gonna do some role playing.
I think I want that one.
This one?
Yeah.
So I had a friend of mine tell me, she goes, "You look like your mother in that wig." So that's gonna look like you're on the Women's Auxiliary Secretary Board. You're on you're secretary
Which
on
way
the board.
does it go?
I don't know. For
I don't
sure.
guess it
Here,
matters.
does it not? That could work. That could work.
I think I have it
Here.
on backwards.
I think
I'm okay with it. I don't think. Oh, my hair.
Oh, no.
Oh, that
Is this backwards? Is this backwards?
You look like.
Is
I
it
don't-
backwards?
No, I think it's right. I can't hide all my hair in it. Hang on. I got a lot of hair.
That looks like you have one major mullet.
I can't get all my.
I don't even know what's happening
I
over
don't
there.
know. I can't get my hair
Wait,
in it.
now you look like
a raccoon hat.
now you look like Cher and Believe. What is this? Okay,
Is my hair coming through? I can't get my hair
Leave
up
it.
into this.
I don't know. This is
I don't know what's going on.
this
here.
is a painful perspective.
I mean, I have bad hair, but this is like. Okay.
Oh my God, you look like my sister. Okay, is this on right? I don't even know.
You look like some bad character
think
from
it's
the
on backwards.
50s.
I think it's on backwards.
Like your name, I feel like
Is
your
this
name.
right?
No, that's definitely backwards. Put it back.
Okay.
I think your name is like
Okay.
Marilyn.
Marilyn.
I'm sorry if your name's Marilyn.
Oh yeah, that's like the HR Karen. Sorry if your name's Karen, but
That is ugly.
how does it look?
You do. You look like a mean girl from.
Do
a
I look like
movie
I'm on
in
the
fif-
deacon wives board?
No, you look like you are like a mean girl from it. Is this the hair or the wig or what?
Just leave it. We're not going to make it any better than it is, so let's just leave it, Lord. Okay.
You do. You look like a mean girl from like
A mean
a
girl.
neighbor that comes over to scold you because your children are improper.
Every neighborhood has one. So you can't shame me until you know me. Okay, so let's talk about some perspectives. So in the church, and we got the candles lit here. So this is what this is what we're gonna call our testimonial.
Oh, okay.
This is our testimonial, girl. So we got our testimonial in the church here, and this is where people would stand up and testify.
Okay.
So they stand up and they testify, and it can be anything, but it could be something that they're going through, some heartache. Okay.
Oh, see, they don't do this in the Catholic.
No,
they don't
they
care
don't.
about your opinion.
No, exactly. They're like,
They just tell you what your
yeah,
opinion
the Catholics just the Catholics go in, do their business, they leave, and they're like,
You
wait a
kneel, you
minute,
stand,
I
you
don't.
pray.
Well, I came
Yeah.
for my problems, not
yeah.
yours.
Okay. Well, I like
And-
this. Okay.
And so we're standing up there, and we stand up, and it could be something good, joyful for the week, like, hey, the Lord healed my
Oh,
bunions. I
okay.
don't know. Or it could be something that somebody just stands up and they just want to testify about, like, hey, I just went through a divorce. I got this. Please pray for me.
Okay.
I just drank a fifth of Jack last night. So all those things. It's up to the church, to gather together, congregate around, heal them, give them some oil, some splashings of water if they need.
I mean, I hope I don't. There's no lice in here.
No,
I'm kidding.
these have been COVID sanitized.
Okay.
I healed the energy
I'm very
space. There's
itchy.
no lice. Just hush up.
Okay.
Hush up. Okay, so my grandma will tell the kids in the church, hush up. So we're gonna testify, and I want you to be able to testify.
Okay.
So testify about what was one of the most hurtful experiences that you had in corporate America, and what you learned from it.
So this wasn't in corporate America. Well, I was in a corporation, but it was a client, actually. So I was a pharmaceutical sales representative, and I had a client who made very inappropriate comments and rather demeaning comments in front of people as I was training them on the science of the drug that I was teaching.
Gotcha.
And
so up there, set up
there,
doing your thing.
and I mean, I have a biomedical science degree, and know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I knew the science. I had studied and really researched and really did know,
Yeah.
what I was talking about. I wasn't just reciting. And so there was a hurtful comment, again, focused on the way I looked and those kind of things, made demeaning me. And at the time, I didn't know how to handle it. So I just laughed, which a lot of people say, sometimes people will laugh as a defense mechanism. And then people will say, see, they weren't offended. But you don't know what to do. And so you're nervous and you're uncomfortable and you don't know what to do. So sometimes the only reaction you have is to laugh and move on.
Yeah. Uncomfortable.
But then I went in the car and just cried.
Yeah.
Because I thought, what in the world? It was just really. So to me, that was really hurtful and difficult to deal with. At a young age, you don't know what to do. Fast forward 20, that was probably almost 20 years ago, I would have a lot more resources to handle it now.
Yeah.
And I probably would have, in that case, it was so bad, I would have said, look, we're not going to do that.
Right.
I probably would have addressed that.
Right. Yeah. Had some words.
We're not going to do that.
Yeah. Had some words at that time and how to handle it.
Yeah.
And
another really hurtful, and I'm not afraid to admit this, is that my first promotion into senior management, I had worked really hard to get there. I moved, took a job. I was accused of having an affair with my boss, who was a male. That was extremely hurtful.
Oh, yes.
Because I knew him, his family, his wife, but I was accused of that. again, it was like, would I be accused of this if I were a male? You know, what is it? There were a lot of hurtful issues there because I had worked so hard to get to that position. I was so excited about it, and it took away all of the excitement.
So that goes back to a little bit of that gentleman saying the thing in the first place. You're like, well, she's
Trigger.
a lot better looking. This little trigger thing. Like, are you again, like,
Trigger.
Is there something about me that's different? Something that I can pinpoint? Why are people treating me like this?
Right. Yeah. So yeah, hurtful.
And the
but-
assumption placed. Like, no
Right.
one's even gotten a chance to get to know me. Girl, that happens all the time in the church. Everybody just assume and judge.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, now, granted, some of the people might have felt like I was not experienced enough or too young or whatever to take the position. So they immediately went to, there must be another reason this person's getting this job rather than this person's worked really hard to get here and earn this at a younger than we expect age or a younger than experience. So there's triggers that we all have based on those hurtful experiences. I'm able to deal with them now, recognize my own triggers, and then it's much easier than it was back then.
Yeah. Well, testify. Thank you very much for sharing that, sister.
Yes.
I know that took great courage and strength.
Yes.
Yes. All right. Well, so
I bet I wouldn't have been accused of that if I had this hair.
I know
just-
you wouldn't have, right? They'd just be like, whatever. There's like hair like that. She ain't having no hair. She would just passed you over. So okay.
She
so
must be really smart.
She must be the smart one. So
Okay, I can take my hair.
because we're talking about perspectives and assumptions. We're not making fun of things that y'all don't think or say.
No.
So
It looks like one of the puppies.
I know it does. You got to pet it. So, okay. So
All right.
let's kind of wrap this up.
Okay.
So you testified. We understand that we have to get through some willful ignorance by approaching people with kindness, understanding our trigger points, when to pivot, take those moments of pause, refrain, regroup, don't scissor kick. Okay. Understand that, our perspectives and our stories are important. They do make impact. And sometimes those approaches with kindness, even when there's some very stubborn, willful ignorance there, we're still planting some seeds.
We are.
Still planting some seeds. So let's talk more about how we can kind of get into maybe a series of willful ignorance and help people through those scenarios.
I think if people would send them, perhaps maybe they've experienced or they're dealing with someone who's behaving in a way that is, and we can maybe help figure out. We could role play and address it.
I love it.
I think that would be good.
And we'll role play with my friend the other day. Her and I were down here. We were playing around, goofing off because we were practicing a song for a wedding we were going to sing. And we put them on, and she was, because it was from our church youth group where we grew up, and she was Deborah and I was Janice. So we'll have to have names. People can ask.
I feel like yours is
Amy and Clinton Shane, but we put the wigs on. It's
I don't know
Marilyn.
what hot mess my hair. I don't know what name goes with
Marilyn
that.
and Connie.
Connie might work. I'm very sorry
I could
if those are your
be a
names.
Bob with that haircut too, couldn't I? I mean, we got to keep it.
No.
We got to keep it diverse, right? We'll figure it out. So tell people a little bit about you, Perspective Consulting. Tell them a little bit about you, and we're gonna wrap this up, and we're gonna head out to the country buffet before the church group gets there.
That sounds good.
Okay, go ahead.
I don't eat buffets. They're gross.
We'll
but
figure
anyway.
something out.
There are too many people touching.
Oh, you are Catholic. You're not
No,
Baptist. Go
that
ahead.
would be my biomedical science degree. Buffets are very not sanitary.
Well, I don't go to them anymore. I was just
Okay,
trying to make
all
a
right.
joke.
I'm
Good
just
Lord,
saying,
could
I'm
you
not-
close it out.
I'm not going to the buffet.
I'm not going to the buffet either, y'all. It's just,
So,
take a moment to pause.
okay, pause for perspective. If you like buffets, I apologize. There's a perspective there.
There it is.
So, so Perspective Consulting, we work with organizations to help bring some insights into human behavior. So we train leaders not to be boss holes. I know you don't like that word, but we help leaders gain some perspective
Yeah.
so that they can be more inspiring, motivating, and influential.
Good.
Yeah.
And just go to hello or
Okay.
just email hello@bsgconsulting.org to share your story, or go to www.bsgconsulting.org. Figure out our contacts, and we'll be able to connect with y'all and connect to some great resources with Amy and what we're doing to kind of bring some different perspectives into organizations. Thank you. I appreciate you so much.
It was
Love
fun.
you.
Thanks for having me.
Amy, can you give your website?
Oh, sure. You can reach us at www.leadwithperspective.com.
Lead with perspective, y'all. Love you. Thank you.
Are there any social media, anything, or is...
You can probably at. I'll have to send that to you because I can't remember my LinkedIn. I think it's just at Perspective C Inc.
We'll put it in the postings and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's in Perspective C Inc. But I'll send
Well, I
it.
appreciate you. This was fun.
It was fun.
What
Thanks.
did you think?
Yeah,
The
good.
horse and the stable and the lights and everything.
It's good.
It's crazy as hell.
You have to laugh.